David O'Connell from Milton, Ontario. Fun fact, Pope John Paul II once ordered 100 pairs of Doc Martens for his Vatican staff, including a pair of size 9s for himself.
This is CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. There are stories you just can't stop thinking about. They take you somewhere, they introduce you to someone, they share something new with you.
Liftoff.
Those are the stories you want to share with your friends, and CBC's award-winning documentary team is bringing them to you every week on Storylines. Storylines, Sunday afternoon at 12:30, 1 in Newfoundland, and always on demand on the CBC Listen app.
You know the feeling of finding a really good podcast? Or the feeling of someone always being there, like your favorite radio show? Stream CBC Podcasts, CBC Music, and CBC Radio anytime, anywhere. Download the CBC Listen app for free.
This is CBC News. At 12 o'clock, we're at 0 with mostly cloudy skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. The president of the Amalgamated Transit Union says the early days of the transit safety officers in Winnipeg have been busy. The 23 officers have been riding Winnipeg buses since late February. ATU President Chris Scott says they've responded to more than 100 calls in the first week. This past Monday, 2 were assaulted after they were called to remove an unruly passenger from a bus.
And the fact that the operator saw them, they were that close, and was able to flag them down and have them respond, it prevented an assault on an operator or another passenger from this individual who started acting out on the bus.
Scott says next week he'll be lobbying Ottawa for more money for transit, including safety measures. The province is updating legislation today to protect people from predators using generative AI. This morning, during CBC's Information Radio, Premier Wab Kinew said the province's intimate images legislation needs to be beefed up and adjusted to deal with the new realities of what can happen online.
People can be victimized without their knowledge in a new kind of way, which was not there perhaps a few years ago. And so we need to update the legislative framework. Unfortunately, we have seen cases like this in Manitoba already.
Kinew says the province will also introduce new laws to prevent sex offenders from being able to change their name in Manitoba and evade accountability. Winnipeg fire crews are investigating an overnight fire in the West End. It was on Arlington Street between Sargent and Wellington just after 1:30 this morning. Firefighters arrived to heavy smoke and flames coming from the vacant bungalow. The fire was declared under control around 3:30 this morning, but Arlington was closed for some time while crews cleaned up. A former Quebec judge has pleaded guilty to manslaughter in the death of his wife. Today's surprise plea ends a 15-year-long legal saga for Jacques Delisle. He was convicted of the first-degree murder of his severely disabled wife in his first trial in 2012. His legal process was plagued with delays and mistakes and a prospect of a new trial. Prosecutor François Gaudin says today's outcome is the best one under the circumstances.
It's been 15 years. He spent almost 9 years in prison, 88 years old. We do not believe that we will have been able to stand trial.
Delisle maintained his wife had taken her own life even though he was the one who gave her the gun. Delisle's defense agreed with the prosecution. He will serve one more day in prison on top of time already served. Ottawa is pulling non-essential staff from its embassy in Haiti. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly says the remaining staff will continue to assist Canadians in Haiti. The country is in a crisis as armed criminal gangs have taken control of much of the capital, and attempts to put together a transitional council to restore order are stalled. Britain has announced a new definition of extremism. It's in response to a sharp rise in hate crimes against both Jews and Muslims since the October 7th Hamas attack in Israel. Groups that get the label will be barred from receiving government funding. Anna Cunningham has your details.
2 weeks ago, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak warned that extremists were trying to tear Britain apart.
In recent weeks and months, we have seen a shocking increase in extremist disruption and criminality.
Today, his Communities Secretary Michael Gove outlined their new definition of extremism.
The promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance.
He added extremism aims to destroy fundamental rights and freedoms or undermine or replace the UK's liberal parliamentary democracy. But some say it risks free speech. Zara Mohammed is the Secretary-General of the Muslim Council of Great Britain.
Communities are very concerned at this time as to how the government is going to apply this consistently and equally.
Groups now identified as extremist won't face criminal action and can still protest, but the government will no longer engage with them. Anna Cunningham for CBC News, London.
China's foreign ministry says a bill that calls for TikTok to be banned in the United States is hypocritical. That's a foreign ministry official saying the proposed ban runs contrary to the principles of fair global competition. The bill, which is currently before the Senate, calls for TikTok to be sold to a company that isn't beholden to the Chinese government. Members of Congress are acting on concerns that TikTok gathers data about U.S. citizens. There is good and bad news today for the SpaceX mega rocket Starship.
This is the furthest and fastest that Starship has ever flown.
So that's the good news. As Starship lifted off this morning from southern Texas, this is the biggest and most powerful rocket ever built, and the first 2 launch attempts ended in explosions over the Gulf of Mexico. But despite this successful liftoff, there is a problem. Starship was scheduled to re-enter the atmosphere and splash down today in the Indian Ocean. However, communication has been lost with the ship, and it's not clear when or if we'll see that splashdown. In Winnipeg, mainly cloudy but clearing this afternoon with a slim chance of flurries today, a high of +2, and Brandon snow ending near noon, then clearing with a high around +1. Right now you're listening to CBC Radio 1, 990 AM, 89.3 FM.
Good afternoon, Manitoba. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, and 100.9 FM in Thompson. Everywhere on your CBC Listen app, or perhaps you're tuning into the YouTube live stream. Hello, viewers on YouTube. Thank you for joining us. It's Thursday, March 14th. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Thank you for spending your afternoon with us. Coming up on today's show, we'll bring you live to the rooftop of a fire hall in Brandon where firefighters have been camping out for 3 days. We'll find out why they're up there. But first up, weeds are the most damaging threat to crops in Manitoba, and they're getting stronger. How new research at the University of Manitoba and drones are working to solve that problem. Farmers fight against many threats to their crops: drought, pests, and of course, weeds. But herbicide resistance is making it harder and harder to manage weeds, and a team at the University of Manitoba is using some unexpected technologies to combat this. And they just received nearly $1.5 million in federal funding. Rob Goulden is a professor in the Department of Plant Sciences at the U of M. He leads the Weed and Crop Biology and Management Lab. Hi, Rob.
Hello. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm interested in what kind of technology that the U of M is researching to combat herbicide resistance.
Well, that's a very good question. The newest one we're working on is using remote sensing and image analysis to hopefully detect and identify herbicide-resistant weed patches.
How is this imaging captured?
So we do capture these images at the moment with standard red, green, blue RGB type cameras, and what's also known as the next level up, which are multispectral cameras. And we capture those using drone technology. These drones give us an advantage at a couple of levels. They allow us to operate the sensors at an altitude where we can optimize a couple of things. What we really need to do with this project is identify weed seedlings that are very small and crop seedlings that are very small early in the growing season. And at the same time, what we want to do is maximize the amount of area that we cover per pass of the camera. And that allows us to minimize the amount of data we need to collect to do the job that we need to do. And drones allow us to operate the cameras at an altitude where we get that resolution that we can work with, and can identify individual weed seedlings and individual crop seedlings, and determine their size, the area that they cover, and so forth.
And I hear that artificial intelligence also plays a role in this research?
It will. We're just starting with all this, yes. So here are some of the challenges. Even though we can generate these wonderful images of crops and weeds, identification of crops and weeds through these large data sets is not easy. Suppose we could put a person in front of a computer.
Do it all by hand.
Do it all by hand, but I'm not sure that's the most effective way. And so what we intend on doing is using artificial intelligence, and or in some cases simpler methods, just color thresholding to separate the crop and the weed of interest. In some cases that's possible. The challenge with plants, however, is that they're all green. So then we need to look at the shape of their leaves. And for this, we need machine learning.
Wow. Now, we're talking about herbicide resistance. What does that mean exactly?
Oh, that's another great question. What is herbicide resistance? I guess the definition of herbicide resistance is that a weed or plant is resistant to a herbicide if a herbicide is no longer effective on that plant that used to be effective on a previous generation of that plant or of that biotype. So what happens with weeds is very similar with what happens with microbes and antibiotics, that repeated use of the same active ingredient or the same herbicide on those weeds eventually selects for weeds that are no longer affected by that herbicide. And so if we continue to spray that herbicide on that population of weeds, we shift that population from a susceptible population, where at one point we killed 90% or more of the individuals, to, in some cases, a highly resistant population where the herbicide doesn't work at all anymore.
How big of a threat is herbicide resistance to Manitoba farmers right now?
It is quite big. That the estimates of costs, I think, across Western Canada are in the hundreds of millions of dollars for producers. Most Manitoba fields have some level of resistant weeds in them. Producers are dealing with them in some cases, specifically managing those weeds. In other cases, less so. But they certainly are an issue. On most producers. I think, I don't know what the most recent number is, but with respect to wild oats, which is one of our most competitive grassy weeds in Western Canada, 80+% of fields in Manitoba have a resistant population of wild oats in them. That doesn't mean that the entire field is polluted with resistant wild oats and that the entire population is resistant, but there are resistant individuals. And if we continue to manage them with herbicides as we do, then these herbicides that we have a finite lifespan. The challenge with that is that we really haven't had much herbicide discovery in the last 40 years. So we've only seen the registration or the discovery of one new mode of action that's reached the marketplace in the last 40 years.
You have support from groups like Manitoba Pulse and Soybean Growers and the Manitoba Canola Growers Association for this research. What are you hearing from these groups about the research and what they need?
Well, I think everybody, all crops struggle with weeds to some extent or other. Some crops are more competitive with weeds, and it might be a little bit easier to manage weeds, and others are less competitive and might be more difficult to manage weeds. However, the herbicide-resistant weed problem is not necessarily a crop-specific problem. It becomes a farm problem, and it affects every crop in rotation. In some cases, will influence what producers can grow, and we don't necessarily want to get to that stage. So it's nice to have all the commodity groups on board, because we are dealing with this problem not within specific crops, but across the farm.
So it's a group effort for sure.
And the group effort, I think, will get us to better outcomes than individual efforts.
Rob, aside from herbicide resistance, are you seeing a push to use less chemicals in food production? Is there also, are you also looking to address food safety?
Oh, you bet. And that's the other thing that we're trying to do with this technology. There are a number of reasons why we perhaps want to spray less herbicides. What this image analysis technology will allow us to do, and as I alluded to earlier before we got into the herbicide post spray management side of resistant patches, is it will hopefully allow us to, or what we're planning on doing with this technology is take images early in the growing season to determine the relative biomass or relative growth of crops versus weeds, to then predict yield losses in the crop, and then make database decisions on what parts of the field we need to apply herbicides on and what parts of the field we don't need to apply herbicides on. And that we have now the technology on the spray application side, where we have sprayers that can turn on individual nozzles across the 120-foot boom width. And so we are, through some of this new technology, able to cut herbicide applications quite dramatically on fields. Very early days to know what exactly what the absolute reductions are, but in some cases, 50% reductions in herbicide applications by not applying them where they're not necessary is what's being achieved. And I think that's a big win for everyone. That's a win for the farmer, that's a win for the environment, and that's a win for the consumer and food safety and food production.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Rob Goulden is a professor in the Department of Plant Sciences at the University of Manitoba. He leads the Weed and Crop Biology and Management Lab.
Ashern, Ericsdale, we want to get to know you a little better. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to your communities March 18th to 22nd. Come and share the stories of your home with me. I'm Bryce Hoy. Let's get to know each other. Communities in Focus. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
It's 12:16. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. And speaking of Communities in Focus, later on in today's show, we're going to talk to Nadia Kidwai, CBC host Nadia Kidwai at CBC Manitoba's Pop-Up Bureau in St. Laurent. It's part of that Communities in Focus initiative. We'll check in with Nadia a bit later in the program. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse today. Thank you so much for joining us. Lots still to come on Radio Noon. Firefighters in Brandon are raising money for charity in an unconventional way. We'll bring you live to the Brandon Firefighter rooftop campout. That's coming up later on Radio Noon. As well, pigs shipped to the U.S. and processed there will soon no longer be labeled Product of the USA. The general manager of Manitoba Pork will join us to discuss how this change in labeling will affect local pork producers. Taking a look at the weather here, mainly cloudy across the south today. Winds will pick up later tonight. We might see some periods of rain and snow in the south tomorrow. Up in the north, folks might get 5 to 10 centimeters of snow. Today, mainly cloudy, slim chance of some scattered flurries. That'll clear late this afternoon. Tonight in Winnipeg, partly cloudy this evening with increased cloud overnight. We'll drop down to -2. Our cold spot today is the Churchill Airport at -18, but our hot spot is Sprague. You folks are sitting at 4 degrees. Manitoba hog producers are preparing for disruptions in trade to the U.S. after a new set of regulations was announced by that country's agriculture secretary. The regulations focus on country of origin labeling. This means that weanlings or young pigs shipped from Canada to the U.S. to be processed can no longer be labeled a product of the USA. The Made in USA labeling can only be used on meat, poultry, and egg products from animals born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the United States. These new regulations will impact beef, poultry, and egg producers in Canada as well. Cam Dahl is the general manager of Manitoba Pork and joins us now. Hi, Cam.
Good to be with you.
Now, can you break this down for us? How would these new regulations affect pork producers here in Manitoba?
Well, right now, what the standard is for things like country of origin labeling is that you can label something the product of the U.S. if the last major changes, if most of the production occurred in the United States. So in Manitoba, we ship about 3 million live animals, live pigs into the U.S. To be finished and processed there. And right now, that those animals, or the pork from those animals, qualifies for the product of the USA label, and that's because most of their lives were spent in the United States. The processing and the packaging occurred in the United States. What this change will do or what it will mean is that the pork from these animals will no longer qualify for that label. And if you go into some major retailers, Costco, even here in Winnipeg, for example, you'll look at their pork products and they're labeled product of the United States. So, I suspect that when this change comes forward, the major retailers, they're not going to change the way they label their products. What they're going to do is tell their suppliers to comply with the new rules. So that will really discriminate against Canadian animals moving into the United States. It will lower the returns for Canadian farmers. It will reduce access for U.S. farmers that are looking for Canada's and Manitoba's high-quality product, and it will likely mean increased costs for consumers. So it is. It's bad for consumers, it's bad for farmers in Manitoba, and it's bad for farmers in the United States.
When is this set to be in place?
So there's an implementation period of about a year. So this is set to come into place January 1st of 2026. So we have some time to change the U.S.'s mind, and we'll be working on that. But so far have been unsuccessful.
Is there not a retail market for pork not labeled, made in the USA?
Yes, and there is, but again, if you look at some of those major retailers that are already using that label, again, I don't think they're going to change their mind and change the way that they label their product. And other purchasers, for example, the government of the United States is one of the largest food purchasers in North America for things like school lunches or the military, and those purchases are going to be product of the United States. So we're really seeing a large chunk of the market that will no longer be using Canadian pork, and that's going to require segregation in U.S. processing plants, and segregation always costs money. So the default position is going to be not to use pork from animals that were born in Canada or Canadian pork.
What do you mean by segregation?
So if you're going to have two different labels on products coming out of your processing plant, one that would have the product of the U.S. and one that doesn't, then you're going to have to keep them separate, and that's throughout the whole processing procedures, that the animals are going to have to be kept separate and the meat is going to have to be kept separate, and that is an expensive proposition.
Okay. How do you think that pork producers in Manitoba could be affected by this financially?
Well, as I said, I am really concerned that this is going to discriminate against Canadian animals, and that's an important word, discriminate, and it would result in lower costs. And previously, the U.S. had a mandatory labeling regulation and legislation in place, and Canada and Mexico took that to the World Trade Organization, and we won because it was deemed that discriminatory against Canadian and Mexican products.
From what you've heard, are U.S. pork producers and processors behind these regulations at all?
That's a really good question. In fact, no, they're not. Everybody wins from this integrated market that we have in North America. U.S. Producers win because they have access to Canadian animals for their finishing operations, and U.S. processors win as well. So the pork industry in the U.S. is not supportive of this new rule coming out of the Agriculture Secretary's office.
Is Manitoba Pork doing anything to push back against this?
Well, this is something we're going to be working with both our provincial and federal governments on, really to push back. And again, we're trying to change the administration's mind. That's a difficult proposition, but it's something that we're going to be really, really actively working on going forward.
Cam, thank you so much for joining us today on Radio Noon.
Thank you for your time.
Cam Dahl is the General Manager of Manitoba Pork. Thanks for tuning into Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Chloe Friesen filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse, and hello to the team here on Radio Noon today. Dylan Longhurst is our tech and director. Brad Lillies is making sure everything looks perfect on our YouTube live stream. You can find that on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. Ariel Posen has shared an older version of his song, Broken But I'm Fine. This version of the song was written and recorded around the guitar. Take a listen. This is Broken But I'm Fine, the original version.
I can't look back, and I'm spinning around again. Is how it seems, really how it is. I can't see the end. No matter what I say, it's like I'm born to make the same mistake again. I closed that door one too many times. I changed the law, I break in sometimes. I feel at home, restless by design. Up the shadows of my secrets. I can't confide, can't find the words to speak it. Where would I start? And where would it end? Up against the wall, underneath it all, I'm broken but I'm fine. Up against the wall, underneath it all, I'm broken but I'm fine.
The latest single from Ariel Pose, and that's the original version of Broken But I'm Fine. The time is 12:29 on the dot. I'm Chloe Friesen. You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM in Winnipeg, 97.9 FM in Brandon, and 100.9 FM in Thompson. Thanks for tuning in. Still lots to come on Radio Noon. Coming up, we'll check in with CBC's Nadia Kidwai, who's at our remote bureau in St. Laurent, is all part of our Communities in Focus series. That's coming up around 12:45. Just after the news here, we'll bring you live to the rooftop of a fire hall in Brandon, where firefighters have been camping out for 3 days. We'll find out why they're up there. That's going to come up just shortly here on Radio Noon. A big hello to our folks listening on our YouTube live stream. You can find that on our CBC Manitoba YouTube page. There's currently 20 people watching. Thanks for tuning in. Your CBC local news is next.
This is CBC News. At 12:30, we're at +2 with mostly cloudy skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good afternoon. I'm Matt Humphrey. A state of emergency has been declared in Shamattawa over bootlegging and substance use. The Northeast Manitoba First Nation is supposed to be a dry community, but during the winter road season, leaders say it's easier for people to smuggle in drugs and alcohol. They want to stop the flow of banned substances to curb a spike in violence and mental health issues. James Favel's company, Anishinaabe Ambassadors, has been hired to search vehicles coming into the community. He says they're doing similar work in 3 other northern communities.
We're not there to criminalize people. So one of the things that I'm very happy about with this program is criminalization is not something that we're after. We don't want to see more people, come into contact with the law. So we go in, we make our seizures, pass it off to chief and counsel. The drugs are typically handed off to our CMP.
Favel says so far in Shamattawa, they've mainly seized alcohol, some cannabis, and a small amount of hard drugs. There's more money coming in the upcoming budget from the province to municipalities to maintain streets and roads. The city of Winnipeg says in February it filled more than 22,000 potholes. In an average February, they fill 3,000. And MPI says it has had more than 8 times the average number of pothole-related claims last month. Premier Wab Kinew told CBC's Information Radio this morning the issue is years of neglect. He says more money is on the way in the April 2nd budget.
Here's the number for funding in terms of operating for the city this coming year, but also here's a predictable 4-year expectation that the city can start to plan around. So hopefully instead of just a scramble each spring for pothole season, there's actually a long-term plan to address this.
Kinew says the province is also investigating starting construction season earlier because of the milder temperatures in January. And Winnipeg fire crews are investigating an overnight fire in the West End. It was on Arlington Street between Sargent and Wellington just after 1:30 this morning. Firefighters arrived to heavy smoke and flames coming from a vacant bungalow. The fire was declared under control around 3:30 this morning, but Arlington was closed for some time while crews cleaned up. And that is your CBC News from Winnipeg. For news anytime, you can head on over to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or you can use the CBC News app.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Back soon, Chloe.
CBC's Thank You, Matt Humphrey, with a look at your news. Heading to the weather forecast, weather specialist Riley Lachuk joins us now in studio. Riley, I'm going to spoiler, we're talking to the firefighters in Brandon who are camping out on a roof. I'm seeing some snowflakes on their video feed right now.
A few scattered flurries moving through the Westman region, and a few pockets of flurries across southern Manitoba. So not totally unexpected, but
it's not the best camping weather.
No, not the best camping weather. But they're tough guys. They're tough.
I'm sure they're tough.
They can brave it. And it's all for a good cause, I know, too. A few scattered flurries slowly moving across southern Manitoba, looking at satellite and radar right now. Even a little bit of mixed precipitation through the early morning hours south of the city. That tapers off as we get through the day today. So, as expected, a few lingering flurries. By the time we get into the evening tonight, though, we should start to see skies clearing once again. So, expect a clearer evening tonight, down to about -2 in Winnipeg. But our next weather maker does start to push into the province as we get through the day on Friday. Starting with some snow moving through northern Manitoba. This is an area of low pressure that is moving in from the Northwest Territories through northern Saskatchewan, crossing into Manitoba, bringing an area of snow basically stretching first thing in the morning, at least, from the Island Lake region through Thompson, and even some rain on the backside of that low into the Flin Flon region first thing in the morning. That snow does trickle further south through the southern Interlake, brings a shot of showers to the Brandon Westman region through the noon hour tomorrow, and then some flurries or some rain, temperature dependent, to the Red River Valley. So we could be in for a little bit of mixing through the day tomorrow. Then we see pretty much scattered precipitation as we move through the overnight period Friday into Saturday before we see a little bit more clearing. Still a good chance of some scattered flurries, though, as we head through Saturday. Right now, -1 in Brandon, 0 in Winnipeg this hour. Thompson at -8. Fairly seasonal for this time of the year. I was talking about snow in northern Manitoba. We are looking at some of that snow, potentially up to 10 centimeters for parts of the northern part of Manitoba, Thompson through the Lynn Lake region. And as we look at your forecast for the next few days, looking at windy conditions through the weekend, and then temperatures getting up to about -2, -3 for mid next week.
Thank you so much, Riley.
No problem.
That's CBC weather specialist Riley Lachuk. You can hear more from Riley coming up on Up to Speed later this afternoon, and of course on the CBC News at 6 this evening. The time is 12:35, and we're going to bring you to Brandon now, where March isn't normally prime camping season, but that's not stopping 5 firefighters from Brandon. They've been camping out on the roof of the No. 2 Fire Hall in Brandon since Tuesday. It's all in an effort to raise money for 3 causes: muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy Westman chapter, and the Brandon Firefighters Charity Fund. We've reached Scotty Ryan, Brian Wenham, Cody Young, Wiley Spice, and Kyle Martin. They are on the roof. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello. Good.
Hello. So we are actually connecting with them on Zoom. So if you're on our CBC YouTube stream, you'll be able to see the folks on the roof. Okay, I have to know, you've been out there since Tuesday. How's it going? Is everyone getting along?
I think they're getting along just fine.
All right. So can you describe your setup? How do you camp on a roof?
We actually have a tent that was provided to us by Elite Safety Services here out of Brandon. So we have the tent set up behind us. That's the green that you can see with the guys behind there. They have some cots in there and some sleeping bags to keep them warm. We also have some guardrails set up around the top of No. 2 Fire Hall here that were provided by Flynn Roofing. So we're safe, when we're kind of waving over the side of the building at everyone. So it's a pretty good setup.
This is your 3rd day up there. Can you give us a recap? How have you been spending your time on the roof?
Yeah, absolutely. We've been spending our time kind of split with our campers that are up here kind of waving to traffic, and then sometimes we've got guys that are just on the ground on 13th Street, which is in front of No. 2 Fire Hall, and they're collecting from the drivers with their boots and collecting donations that way. So it's kind of been a cycle so that guys are kind of staying warm and they're kind of getting up off the roof and they're getting on the ground and then back and forth kind of deal.
Let's talk about the causes you're supporting. I'm currently watching just the crew with their signs that say "Fill the Boot." You've got banners. What are you supporting by camping out on this roof?
We've done this for, I believe, 9 years now. And obviously we're supporting our 3 charities, the Muscular Dystrophy, Cerebral Palsy, and the Brandon Firefighters Charity Fund. So we're supporting our community first and foremost. We're able to keep those funds local. We're able to get wheelchair ramps. In the past, we've helped people get handy van accessible vehicles. We've been able to just help people around the community that need kind of the funds that come from this charity. So it's really special to be able to keep all the funds right here in Westman area.
Do you know how much money you've raised so far?
You know what? We've been kind of keeping track a little bit here and there. We haven't been counting right up to minute, but I think we're probably somewhere over 20,000 right now. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I need to know more about life on the roof of a fire hall. What's on the menu at mealtime when you're camping on a roof? Where do you cook up there, or?
You know what? Yeah, do we get food? We've been eating pretty good. We've had a lot of fantastic sponsors here in Brandon. The restaurants have been taking care of us and volunteering a lot of their food towards us. So that's the nice part is we haven't really had any problem getting meals. It's fantastic to see kind of the community come together and all the restaurants and just the different businesses that support us. It's fantastic. We just love the community.
That sounds, number one, delicious. I see some snow on your feed. What's the weather been like for this camp out so far?
You know what? We got really lucky the first day, and it was beautiful outside. We had kind of +4 and 5 degrees. Yesterday, there was a lot of rain. Today, we got hit with a lot of snow. It's still kind of snowing right now. I'm not sure if you're able to see it.
I can see it a bit, yeah.
Yeah, we've got
every season.
literally every season that is Manitoba, yeah.
Now, most importantly, how can folks in Brandon support the rooftop campout?
Just come by number 2 Fire Hall. If you're interested in making a donation for our cause, please come by. Even just come say hi. We love the support. Yeah, we're at 1301 on 13th Street here in Brandon, number 2 Fire Hall. Just come see us, and if you want to make a donation, do that. If you're a business owner and you want to be a sponsor, we would love that, and we would love to have your support for next year's campout as well. So anything is fantastic for us.
I'm sure you wouldn't say no to more food as well, hey?
Never. I've never known firefighters to say no to food.
Thank you all for joining us here on Radio Noon, and all the best. I have to ask, how long are you up there until?
We're going to be up here until tomorrow. Yeah, till we go crazy. We'll be up here until tomorrow at 5 p.m., and then we're having a bud, spud, and steak to kind of cap it all off.
Well, all the best, and congratulations for almost making it through all of your days up there on the roof.
Thank you so much, Brandon.
That was Scotty Ryan, Brian Wenham, Cody Young, Wiley Spice, and Kyle Martin. They're camping out on the roof of the number 2 Brandon Fire Hall. You can go visit them, as I said, to drop some money in the boot. And to keep out with their camp out, you can find that on Facebook. Just search Brandon Firefighter Rooftop Campout.
All over Turtle Island, host Rosanna Deerchild welcomes you to Unreserved.
Indigenous peoples are retelling history through an Indigenous lens.
Unreserved, celebrating 10 years, looking back at how far we've come, and looking forward to the journey ahead.
How do we keep the story going?
Unreserved with Rosanna Deerchild. Now at a new time, Sunday afternoon at 2:30 in Newfoundland, 3 Pacific, 4 Mountain, and on demand on CBC Listen.
You're listening to Radio Noon on CBC Radio 1. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. Montreal singer-songwriter Shayna Hayes released her new album recently. Have a listen to the title track. This is Kindergarten Heart.
Sparkle, sunny days, I get older in every way that won't matter. Kindergarten heart in me. Magic, green and blue, I am wilder in every way that I choose. Dog pile, funny faces, I'm fragile in funny ways that are piling on with age. Old time souvenirs of a gold mine of greener years, and I'm trying, but I get it wrong, so I back down from the fight when there's nothing left to bite but my own tongue. Castle, sand and snow, build a fortress, a mighty home in your elbows, knees and toes. Bare feet, barley kissing my soul, sweet this summer's all that I know. Broad smile, funny faces, I'm fragile in funny ways that are piling on with age. Old time souvenirs of a gold mine of greener years, and I'm trying, but I get it wrong, so I back down from the fight when there's nothing left to bite but my own tongue.
That was Kindergarten Heart from Montreal artist Shayna Hayes. You're listening to Radio Noon here on CBC Radio 1. The time is 12:45. The temperature in St. Laurent is sitting at 0, feels like -3. And that's where CBC Manitoba is this week, St. Laurent. Reporter Emily Brass has been in the community since Monday, meeting people and hearing their stories. And if you were listening to Information Radio this week, they broadcast live from there yesterday. It's part of our Communities in Focus initiative, where we get to know parts of our province better. Nadia Kidwai is CBC Manitoba's senior producer of Community Connection, and she's in St. Laurent herself. Good afternoon, Nadia.
Hi, Chloe. Thanks for having me on.
So glad that you're here. How are things in St. Laurent today?
So let me give you a weather hit.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Anytime. It's completely overcast in St. Laurent currently. But last night, actually, I was invited to some community members kindly invited me and Emily over for dinner last night, and it was right on Lake Manitoba, the house overlooking. So it was the first time I've actually seen Lake Manitoba completely frozen, and it was so calm. And there was a beautiful sunset because the skies kind of cleared up a little bit. So cloudy this morning, but there was a gorgeous sunset over a frozen Lake Manitoba last night.
What a lovely way to spend your evening. That sounds amazing. What are some of the things that you've done and seen this week in St. Laurent?
So you talked about kind of what Emily's doing here, and then obviously Marcy was here with her live radio broadcast. The thing that I do during these Communities in Focus initiatives is what I call community office hours. And basically, I set up a little office in the community. So right now, I'm at the MTT Petro-Canada Diner on Highway 6. Got my laptop, got my notebooks. And this is really a way for me to meet community members where they're at, right? No cameras, no microphones, just a chance to meet community members and hear their stories of what's happening in their community, what they're passionate about, story ideas, perhaps for CBC, questions they might have for me about CBC. And so, you know, I'm here till 3 p.m. today. So if there are people out and about in St. Laurent or surrounding communities, please come down to MTT Petro-Canada's Diner. I'm in the right at the back, and I'm ready to meet people and hear their stories.
In your mobile office. That's awesome. Now, Nadia, what have you been hearing from folks in the community as you've been spending time in this diner?
So it's funny because I drove up yesterday, and as soon as I entered into the diner, I was walking in with two women who actually came to see me.
Oh, wonderful.
Lovely. Jay Lambert and Debbie Laverly, who I just fell in love with, because both of these women, they were born and raised in St. Laurent. They ended up leaving for a while, but something called them back to the community. They ended up coming back, and they are so passionate about Métis and Michif language, history, culture, because both of them wrestled with that identity because there was so much shame put on them from an early age, and they've really reclaimed their pride in that identity. And both of them have been so involved in celebrating and promoting their history and culture. And actually, I was so taken by their stories that I encouraged them and invited them to come on the Weekend Morning Show this weekend, because their stories are so great, and they're such great storytellers too. They need their own podcast, to be honest. But
I would tune in for sure.
Right. So they're actually going to be on the Weekend Morning Show this weekend talking about their journey. And for example, Jay was so involved in bringing St. Laurent history to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C.
What?
I mean, that wasn't a crazy, amazing story. And so that's just one example. And then Debbie was so involved in collecting stories from families here. I think she was part of a group that put together a St. Laurent history book, which is, I think, 550 pages, 1,500 photos. They interviewed 150 different families, and they all put it together in this amazing history book. So she's going to be talking about that. So, I mean, that was just in the first few hours of me coming in, so that was great. I got some content for the show this weekend. And then last night, as I mentioned, we were invited to some community members invited us to their place for dinner. And I'm actually fasting right now because it's Ramadan.
Yes,
so
it's Ramadan.
I awkwardly say, I'd love to come, but I can't eat until sunset. So they patiently, waited till 7:35. And it was the first time I broke my fast with, fresh pickerel and deer meat. So that's how we do Ramadan in St. Laurent, and it was just lovely.
What a memory that is for you to keep.
Honestly, the whole community has been so warm and welcoming and kind, and it's why I love doing Communities in Focus. This project where we go take a team from the newsroom and go to different parts of the province just to get to know the community better and do a better job of reflecting their story. So as I mentioned, I'm here at MTT till 3 p.m. today, so come by and come and see me and have a chat and let me know what's going on in St. Laurent.
There's truly no shortage of stories, no matter where you are in Manitoba. It's incredible.
The best part. Yeah,
and I understand that you're going to be in a new location next week. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, so this week we're in St. Laurent, and next week we continue our time in the Interlake, but we're focusing more on Ericsdale and Ashen. So that's where we'll be next week. This week, Emily Brass was the reporter. Next week, Bryce Hoy will be the reporter for that whole kind of the RM of West Interlake. So we're going to be there. Bryce is going to be there all week collecting stories. He's busy working on that now. I'll be doing my kind of community office hours next Wednesday in Ericsdale, in the rec centre, next Thursday in Ashen at the Chicken Chef. And then Marcy and Corey will be doing their live broadcast of information next Thursday morning in Ashen at the Chicken Chef. Everyone's invited to watch her in action, and then we're doing a community breakfast right after that from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. We'll all be there. We're inviting the community of Ashen and Ericsdale to come. Anyone in the area should come and have breakfast with us, on us, and get to meet us. And all that information is online, so if you weren't quite quick enough to jot that all down, head to our website. I know you have that website, but it's cbc.ca/Manitoba/community, and that has all the info of where I'll be, where Marcy will be, where we'll all be next week in Ericsdale and Ashen.
A community breakfast is probably one of the hardest things to pass up. That sounds like an amazing morning plan. Nadia, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon from St. Laurent. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having me, Chloe.
Nadia Kidwai is CBC Manitoba's senior producer of Community Connection. As she mentioned, she's at the MTT Petro-Canada on Highway 6 today until 3 p.m. Go visit Nadia. Go share your stories if you're in that area. For more information about our events next week and how you can attend, head to cbc.ca/Manitoba/community and go see Nadia once again. It's now time for our Word Nerd. Here's Elizabeth Withy with a story of lazy.
Lazy, lazy, lazy.
We've all had one of those days where all you want to do is, well, nothing. Some would qualify this as downtime, rest. Others would say it's laziness.
My lazy uncle, he's the laziest cat you ever saw. To be as lazy as he is should be against the law.
That word, lazy, it's got a bit of a barb to it, doesn't it? I mean, it's fine if we use it to describe ourselves or our plans. I'm having a lazy weekend, and it is such a treat. But if you call someone else lazy, well, it's a bit of an insult. And that's where the word lazy originates. It dates back to the 1500s, meaning someone who is averse to labor or effort, spelled Laysy or Laysie. The word's origin is probably Middle Low German, leich, meaning weak or tired, or early modern Dutch, lusig, which may all originate from an ancient word root sleg, meaning slack. You know, like slack off or slackline.
When they nod their heads, I know they understand. Honest, I ain't lazy, I'm just dreaming.
I used to think lazy was from the French, laisser, as in laissez-faire, literally leave to do, meaning do what you will, or a hands-off approach. But there's no evidence of this.
Wake up, you lazy bones, and go and fetch the cattle. Wake up, you lazy bones, and go and fetch the cows. The cows are...
Today there are a few lazy phrases. Lazy bones, lazy river, and of course, lazy Susan, the name of a spinning platter that you put on a dining table so everyone can reach the food. The term lazy Susan dates back to the early 1900s and peaked in popularity in the 1950s and 60s. But no one seems to be able to agree on why it's a lazy Susan to begin with. These days, most of us call it a revolving tray, though IKEA does sell several lazy Susans, including the Snuda, the Smeda, and the Aptitlig.
Out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer.
For CBC Radio, I'm Elizabeth Withy.
And beer. Roll out those lazy, hazy, crazy days of summer. Dust off the sun and moon, sing a song of cheer.
Thanks to Elizabeth Withy for that one. And if there's a word that you're wondering about, you can drop a line to wordnerd@cbc.ca.
Brady Keeper and Bridget Laquette both played here. What future star will you see this year? The Manitoba Indigenous Cultural Education Centre annual Indigenous Minor Hockey Tournament is back March 22nd to 24th at the Hockey for All Centre. The best Indigenous minor hockey players in Manitoba come together in competition, and CBC is a proud sponsor. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Time is 12:56 and Radio Noon here is coming to an end. But first, Faith Fundal joins us for a sneak peek at what's to come on Up to Speed. Hi, Faith.
Chloe, it is the Battle of Spring.
Oh.
Also involving suspensions, struts, and rims. Do you know what we're talking about? We know...
I'm getting like bridge words?
Nope. We know how damaging potholes can be.
That just proves how little I know about cars.
It's a big deal. We're going to hear more from a mechanic and what they have to deal with in the aftermath of potholes versus cars and trucks.
I personally will need to listen in very closely so I can gain some knowledge about car words.
I mean, I didn't think... Yeah, okay. Suspensions, struts, rims, wheels,
Did
tires.
you see where I said suspension, like suspension bridge?
I mean, technically the suspensions do suspend the car on the ground.
We're going to need an expert for this one.
Yeah, we're going to have to fix that. It'll be fun because the damage is pretty big. Can be pretty big.
Can be pretty big. Looking forward to that, Faith. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's CBC's Faith Woondal. You can catch them on Up to Speed this afternoon from 3 till 6. And you'll learn so much about cars. I'll learn so much about cars and not bridges. Thank you for tuning into Radio Noon this afternoon. I'm Chloe Friesen, filling in for Marjorie Dowhouse. A big thank you to the team here. Riley Lachuk brought us the weather. Matt Humphrey brought us the news. Brad Lillies is behind our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Dylan Longhurst is our tech and director. Thanks to Nellie Gonzalez, our show producer, and our senior producer of audio, Leif Larson. Thanks again for tuning in to Radio Noon. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Coming up next is Quirks and Quarks.